Hello, everyone, and welcome to Asia Society Hong Kong Center series, Reimagining the Future. In this digital event, we'll be examining Korean pop culture's role in policymaking. Thank you to the Korean Cultural Center in Hong Kong for partnering with us to make this happen, and Nicole Kim for being our Korean English interpreter. I'm your moderator, Jody Chan, VP of Product and Partnerships at Nodi Labs, where we build and launch web performance and content management software products. I'm also a professional singer-songwriter that you can find on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to your music. Today, Michael Jung and Yang-won Lee will speak on Korean popular culture and its intersection with policy making, covering the past, present, and most importantly, future direction as active players in the space. Michael Jung is the managing director of CJ Group Entertainment's arm in Hong Kong. CJ E&M is a South Korean entertainment and mass media company and one of Asia's #1 content companies, with over 16 TV channels and a wide range of original content across drama, entertainment, and music. Chances are that you've probably come across some of their work in and outside of Hong Kong. We also have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Yang-won Lee, General Director of the Game Division of KOKA, and previously General Director of the Policy Division of KOKA. KOKA is short for Korea Creative Content Agency, a governmental agency that oversees and coordinates the promotion of the Korean content industry across broadcasting, culture and content, gaming, and more. Chances are that you've also come across their work in the Korean pop culture space, although indirectly, which I'm sure he'll speak to in about very, very shortly after Mr. Michael Jung. So a few housekeeping items. We'll first hear from the speakers, and then we'll be joining you in a Q&A session. So to submit any questions, make sure you drop in the Zoom chat box or the Slido link, which you should have received through Asia Society's email. So without further ado, Michael, please take it away.
Okay. Can you guys see this? Okay. Can you see this? Okay. Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to explain the background of how Korea's popular culture, especially K-pop, drama, and the film, were able to develop as an industry. And it's a growth process in the global market and the direction of its future development based on my personal experience. To understand how Korea's entertainment business has developed as it is today gaining global popularity, we need to look back to the 1990s in Korea. The 90s was an inflection point for Korean popular culture as an industry. It is deeply associated with several aspects, including political, social, and cultural changes. First of all, Korea in the 90s was a period when the military dictatorship ended and a liberal social atmosphere was starting to form gradually in the hopes for democracy. The government started making various policies so that more people could travel around the world and more foreigners could easily enter Korea. It was also the period when the younger generation began to easily access the foreign cultures in earnest. Furthermore, Generation X, who were born in the early 70s and attended the college in the early 90s, also started to appear in Korea. They had a completely different mindset and lifestyle from the previous generation and started to set trend. In addition, with the increase in PC penetration and the expansion of a new technology like the internet, the younger generation began to expect that and share much more diverse information and cultures from around the world much faster. It laid foundation for various cultures to meet more easily and for exchanging and developing new inspiration. The Reply 1997 and 1994 series, one of the most popular dramas to date by TVN of CJENM, was created by the directors and the writers who are Generation X in the 90s. Just by looking at this, you can see how much the 90s greatly influenced the sentiment of the younger generation at the time. Korea's K-pop, film, and drama industries were inspired by such social changes and encountered small opportunities to develop further. Let me explain each of them. Korea pop music experienced significant changes in the early 90s with the emergence of a male dance group called Tej Boys. The success of Tej Boys, which remains as a legend of this day, is not just a success story of a group of the singers, but the beginning of the industrialization of Korean popular music. Teenagers, people in their 20s became enthusiastic about new music that they had never experienced in Korea. And their new fashion style immediately became the most popular trend. New changes that had been seen before, had not been seen before, such as the emergence of loyal fandom and fan clubs, diversification of profit through album sales, concert, merchandise sales, product advertisement, etc., created a social phenomenon throughout Korea. And after 4 years of activity, Tej Boys retired while being at the top and forever remain as a legend. However, their footsteps greatly inspired the remaining musician and had a significant influence on the establishment in 1995 of SM Entertainment, where the Korean idol industry began and which remains as the top artist management company today as well. SM Entertainment had a profound impact on the development and globalization of K-pop. The company was the first entertainment agency in Korea to create and implement a detailed system for systematic discovery and preparation of young talent through training, idol debut through the commercial planning and the subsequent fandom management. After that, JYP Entertainment and the YG Entertainment, later founded by Yang Hyun-seok, a member of Tej Boys, were both established in the 90s, and K-pop began to take the path to full-scale industrialization. The next is about TV content. Until the 1980s, two free-to-air TV stations, KBS and MBC, competed in Korea to produce various broadcasting contents. However, in the 90s, two major changes also began in the TV media market. The first was the launch of a free-to-air TV called SBS. Unlikely KBS and MBC, which were supported and controlled by the government, SBS was the first privately operated terrestrial broadcaster in Korea. It quickly gained popularity with its aggressive investment and new attempts based on its business mindset. Another big change was the launch of cable channels. Through this, Korean viewers were able to watch 3 free-to-air channels and the dozens of cable channels. And as various specialized channels were created, the broadcasting content production market began to expand significantly. Mnet, CJENM's music channel was also launched at this time and started to create the synergy with the idol craze that began at the time. The most significant event that occurred in the 90s in the development of the Korean film industry was the debut of the top creators representing the Korean film industry until now. Director Park Chan-wook of Old Boy and Bong Joon-ho of Parasite and Kim Ji-woon of A Tale of Two Sisters all debuted in the 90s and began to incorporate new forms and stories into Korean films. Since then, they have won awards at international film festivals, greatly contributing to promoting the Korean films in the global market. In addition, Busan International Film Festival, which has established itself as the largest film festival in Asia, started in the 1996. It provided a lot of inspiration and systematic support to younger writers and creators, and they're greatly contributing to the development of Korean films. With this wave of a change, the first Korean action blockbuster Shuri, released in early 1999, mobilized 6 million viewers across the country and showcased the huge commercial success that had never been seen before in Korean film history. This gave confidence to the Korean film industry that Korean film can outperform Hollywood films, at least in Korea. As investment began to pour in, it kick-started a virtuous cycle of investment and performance. As mentioned earlier, the development of the entertainment industry was possible due to the political, social, and the cultural changes in the 90s. The inspiration that these changes gave to the younger generation and the content creators, and the innovation of the first movers who played a pioneering role that allowed the popular culture's full-scale industrialization. Personally, I also believe that the support from the Korean government also played a significant role. The screen quota that protect the Korean film industry and the mandatory broadcasting ratio of Korean contents on the terrestrial TV and the cable TV channels that protect the TV content production industry are representatives' protection policies. In addition, through the various policies set by government agents such as KOCA that support content development and the nurture creators help to strengthen Korean content competitiveness and certainly played an important role in the development of Korean popular culture. Furthermore, by reflecting the more liberal social atmosphere, the government minimized censorship and expanded the freedom of content creation, enabling creators to implement their ideas more easily into content. In this regard, I trust that Mr. Lee, who will be the presenting later, will provide a more detailed explanation. In the 2000s, many small and medium-sized management companies emerged and benchmarked the business model of the company like SM, YG, and the JYP, which created numerous top idol groups. With such development, K-pop began to break away from the small Korean market and enter the Asian market. In particular, the artist development system in which young talented boys and girls are casted and trained for many years through their own training system to develop their skills, as well as fierce internal competition greatly contributed to allowing Korean idol groups to debut with fundamental skills. K-pop's full-fledged overseas expansion began as SM's Boa, TVXQ, and the Super Junior, followed by the Kara and the Wonder Girls, gained huge fandom in the Japanese and Asian market during this period. In addition, music consumption method began to change significantly, led by digital music and the music videos accelerating their overseas expansion. Not only the new single of a popular idol groups, but even a debut single of a rookie idol group could distribute it as a music video around the world through YouTube, making it much easier for them to penetrate overseas market compared to dramas and movies. The next step in K-pop's overseas expansion was to target Asian fandom through a hybrid type member composition strategy, we call, in which talented foreign members are trained for many years and then participate as a newly planned idol group members, starting with the 2PM, EXO, GOT7, these days Twice and Blackpink have achieved relatively greater success in the respect members' countries through this strategy. And it can be said that this is an evolved method of targeting overseas market more aggressively. In addition, as in the case of BTS and Halsey and Blackpink with Selena Gomez, through collaboration with the US artists, they are starting to tap the US market more actively beyond the Asian market. For the early 20s, Korean drama began to expand overseas through the overseas licensing. Of course, Korean drama at the time were out of mainstream. Then in 2020, a very important event occurred in the history of Korean drama. A drama called Winter Sonata gained a huge success locally and was sold in Japan. And it became incredibly successful beyond imagination in Japan. After that, the 대장금, Jewel in the Palace in 2003 and the Full House in 2004 became widely popular in various parts of Asia, one after another. And the cast members were invited to fan meetings and so on. Each drama achieved greater commercial success in the Asian market than the income it earned in Korea. This was a decisive moment for Korean drama producers and KBS, MBS, and SBS, which led the investment in drama production at the time to start planning drama aimed at overseas market. CJ ENM's TVN, which was launched in 2006, gained the confidence through the previously mentioned Reply series after initial trial and error, and started to lead the development of new system in drama production and investment. CJ ENM's effort led to the birth of Studio Dragon, and after Netflix started its service in Korea in 2016, Studio Dragon played an active role as a key provider of successful Korean drama on Netflix, promoting its branding globally. As such, the success of some works in the overseas market in the early 2000s It led to expansion of investment in drama and the strengthening of plans to target overseas market. And then expansion of a VOD streaming service market, and it led to expansion of access to more viewers in more countries. In the end, through Squid Game, Korean drama developed into a mainstream genre that is loved even in the North and the South American and the European market beyond the Asia. For the movies, in the 2000s, Korean film industry entered a new renaissance. A total of 5 films that reached 10 million admission viewers in cinema were created in the 2000s alone. Criterion for mega success at the box office for Korean films. Even Hollywood films had never achieved this in Korea. As a result, the Korean film market became one of the few countries where a domestic film had the highest market share. Such great success led to increase the investment, and more creators and the good actors flocked to the film industry, creating a virtuous cycle of improving the quality of the work. But unfortunately, it is also true that it took a long time for domestic success to lead to the success in the global market. Korean drama has been introduced continuously through the TV channels in major Asian countries and built up a fandom. However, the overseas expansion of Korean films required local distributors to first purchase them for the cinema distribution, release them in the cinema next, and then sell them by window. One reason for this was that the Korean film did not perform well in the cinema. In fact, after the huge success of the My Sexy Girl in the Asian market in 2001, it took more than 15 years for Train to Busan to be more successful than My Sexy Girl. During that time, Korean films were only released on a small scale in the Asian market, or were exposed sporadically on local TV channels. Korean film fans in Asia became used to watching free movies mainly on pirate movie platforms. However, since then, CJENM started to service the blockbuster Korean movies channel, TVN movies, to 6 Asian countries. And as films such as Train to Busan and Along with the God have been very successful in the cinema, the interest in Korean film has gradually increased. In addition, as the content consumption method gradually changing with the VOD, OTT services, people are getting used to enjoying the paid content in a good environment, and overseas viewers' access to high quality Korean movies is beginning to increase. And overall, the success of Parasite played a decisive role in raising interest in Korean film to the mainstream level. Lastly, I want to talk about the future direction of the K-pop and movies and drama. If you look at the global music market, the US market is by far the top, followed by Japan, Germany, the UK, and France. Korea is maintaining 9th to 10th place, and based on the YouTube, more than 80% of K-pop consumption takes place in overseas market other than Korea. In addition, due to the huge success of BTS, K-pop management companies are now establishing overall strategies and the planning directions, targeting overseas market more actively than before. Furthermore, the agencies are actively investing in the developing local idols, mainly in the US and Japan, the first and second largest market in the music industry, by actively leveraging the Korean idol development system. In fact, JO1 and INI were created through CJENM's Japanese version of Produce 101. These two Japanese idol groups created through a Korean system are currently gaining the great popularity in Japan. HYBE, the agency of BTS, began to establish a foothold in the US in earnest by acquiring Ithaca Holdings, which manages Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande. Moreover, Korean K-pop agencies are already making a move to collaborate with large IT companies such as Naver and Kakao to develop new business models. Through collaboration, they hope to create and claim the new market by combining music with the future technology, such as expanding its artists and the music IP to the Metaverse platform, or using AR, VR, and XR that mixes the two. For the drama and the movies, as we all know, the pandemic of the past 2 years has caused great pain to many people around the world. But for OTT operators, it has a different meaning in that it played a decisive role in accelerating the shift of the global contents media market to OTT. Through the global OTT platform, Korean dramas in particular became mainstream for the drama fans around the world. And in the end, Korean drama became the show that secured the highest household view on Netflix. The monumental success of the Squid Game and the movie Parasite gave Korean content production studios greater confidence. In particular, CJENM acquired the Endeavor Contents, American production company famous for La La Land and The Killing Eve. Through Korean Studio Dragon and the Hollywood Endeavor Contents and the Japan's Studio Dragon Japan, CJENM plans to secure content production capabilities in key countries that connect the world and promote a content business targeting the global market in earnest. In the end, K-pop, K-drama, and the K-movies will bring their internal capabilities accumulated over the years to the US, which has the world's largest content market and IP development capability to establish a business space there. The strategy seems to be maximizing K-content market power by expanding into global market through synergy with the creators in the US. And it has already been put in motion. In addition, in order to develop a new business model using the Metaverse, which is still in its infancy and become a market leader, it is expected that effort will be made to collaborate with the various related platforms and operators. Thanks for listening for my part, and for the next, I'm over to Yang Han. Thanks.
Okay, everything is okay? Can you see my presentation? Okay. 그러면 이제부터 시작하겠습니다. 저는 한국어로 진행하겠습니다.
Okay, so I'll start my presentation. I'll be presenting in Korean.
시간이 조금 딜레이 돼서 조금 빨리 그리고 요점만 말씀드리는 걸로 하고요. 그렇게 진행하겠습니다.
I understand we are running out of time, so I will briefly introduce and summarize my presentation.
네, 제가 오늘 발표할 주제는 한국의 대중문화가 글로벌화된 부분에 있어서 그에 관련한 전략과 정책 그리고 나아가서 한류 정책을 어떻게 수립하고 지금 계획하고 있는지를 간략하게 설명드리겠습니다.
So today I'd like to talk about the globalization of Korean pop culture, including the strategies implemented and policies implemented. And I'd like to also talk about future planning, policy planning for the Hallyu policies.
네, 저는 한국의 코카 코리아 크리에이티브 컨텐트 에이전시에서 게임 본부장을 맡고 있는 이양환이라고 합니다.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Lee Yang-hwan. I am the director of game division of Korea Creative Content Agency named KOKA.
코카는 2009년에 생겼고요. 게임과 방송 그리고 문화 다른 장르의 콘텐츠 장르 여러 장르를 아울러서 지원하고 관련한 정책을 지원하는 기관입니다.
KOKA was set up in May 2009, and we provide overall comprehensive support for content-related industries, including broadcasting, game, culture, and game. And we also provide policy support as well.
네, 한국의 서울에 그 지점이 있고 또 여러 군데 분산돼서 여러 가지 시설을 가지고 있고요. 특히 해외에 8군데 비즈니스 센터를 운영하고 있습니다.
We have various offices and facilities throughout Seoul, and we also operate 8 business centers overseas.
네, 홍콩에도 앞으로 비즈니스 센터를 만들기를 바라고요.
I wish we will open up a business center in Hong Kong as well in the near future.
네, 본격적으로 한국 대중문화의 글로벌화에 대해서 이제 설명을 시작하겠습니다.
So let me introduce the factors behind the globalization of Korean pop culture.
한국의 대중문화는 지금 코로나19를 전후해서 굉장히 큰 특히 코로나19 이후 시대에 큰 성공을 거두고 있는데요. 여러분 잘 아시는 패러사이트 그리고 넷플릭스 오리지널인 오징어 게임과 그리고 뭐 BTS, 블랙핑크는 다 여러분들이 잘 알고 계실 겁니다.
Korean pop culture has been immensely popular before and after the pandemic, but especially more so after the pandemic. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the movie Parasite, Netflix original content Squid Game, BTS, Blackpink, and so on.
네, 가장 여러 가지 성공 요인이 있는데 가장 많이 성공 요인으로 지적되고 있는 것은 굉장히 한국 콘텐츠와 콘텐츠 산업이 모험심이 강하고 도전 정신이 강하고 그리고 창의성과 이게 신선함이 다른 국가들보다 잘 갖춰져 있다는 그런 평가가 많고요.
There are many success factors contributing to the globalization of K-pop culture, but I think one of the factors that are mentioned widely in this sector is that Korean content industry is more adventurous, creative, and fresh compared to other markets.
근데 가장 중요한 것은 이런 지금 보시는 여러 가지 성공한 한국 콘텐츠들은 세계에서 성공한 콘텐츠들이지만 굉장히 한국화되어 있다고 보셔도 될 것 같습니다. 한국만의 색깔이 있다는 것이죠.
I think one of the things that are worth mentioning is that although those content have become globally successful, but they are in its nature very Korean.
한국 콘텐츠 산업이 글로벌화된 여러 가지 동력 중에 제가 오늘 말씀드리고자 하는 부분 중에 하나는 디지털 트랜스포메이션입니다.
There are many driving forces leading to the globalization of the K-pop culture, but I'd like to talk about digital transformation in particular.
한국은 전 세계에서 디지털 트랜스포메이션에 가장 잘 대응하고 있는 국가라고 저는 생각하고 있습니다.
I think Korea is one of the most well-prepared country for the digital transformation.
디지털 트랜스포메이션이 왜 중요하냐면 이 시기에 여러 가지 변화가 있었고 콘텐츠 산업은 그 변화에 대응해야 했기 때문입니다.
The reason why digital transformation is important is because it has resulted in many changes which the content industry had to respond to.
콘텐츠 산업에서의 콘텐츠는 미디어와 페어인데요. 그 미디어 산업 환경이 변했습니다. 미디어 산업에서의 파워가 미디어 자체에서 이용자들로 옮겨간 것이 가장 큰 변화입니다.
The content industry goes hand in hand with the media industry, and there has been a power shift in the media industry from media to its users.
그래서 콘텐츠 산업에 있는 사람들과 또 policy maker들은 이 유저에 이제 관심을 안 둘 수가 없게 됐습니다.
So this led to those working in the content industry as well as policymakers to pay more attention to users.
그렇게 됨에 따라서요, 이 유저들의 라이프 스타일이 어떻게 변화하는지에 관심을 기울여야 하고요.
So we had to pay more attention to the changes in users' lifestyle.
그리고 예전에는 한 지역에 물리적으로 묶여 있던 이 팬들이 지금 현재 온라인을 통해서 국경 없이 확장될 수 있는 환경이 조성된 것도 디지털 트랜스포메이션 시대의 변화라고 할 수 있겠습니다.
Another change led by the digital transformation is that the fans who were in the past bound by their locations are now enjoying borderless world through the proliferation of the digital technology.
특히 이런 디지털 트랜스포메이션 시대에 주목받는 유저들의 특성은 나이대로 봤을 때 밀레니얼 세대와 Z 세대가 많다는 겁니다.
So the major users of the digital transformation era are the millennials and Gen Zs.
이런 그 10대에서 30대 후반까지의 세대들인데요. 이들은 모바일 그리고 디지털 네이티브의 특징을 가지고 있고요. 특히 소셜 미디어를 많이 이용하는 세대라는 특징이 있습니다.
Those refer to the people in the teens and as well as those in the 30s. The characteristics of this generation is that they are digital and mobile native, and they are also the heavy users of social media.
그 밖에도 디지털 트랜스포메이션과 대중문화를 생각했을 때 큰 변화는 구독 경제라는 것, 그러니까 넷플릭스의 과금 모델인데요. 이런 구독 경제 활성화와 또 IP 비즈니스가 활성화됐다는 특징을 가지고 있습니다.
Another changes are subscription economy, which is the main monetization strategy for Netflix, as you all know, and IP business is another big change led by the digital transformation.
네, 디지털 트랜스포메이션은 전 세계적 현상이고 결국에 이런 현상에 여러 가지 이 콘텐츠 산업 환경 변화 요인이 있는데 한국은 한국 정부와 그리고 기업들이 이런 곳에 굉장히 대응을 잘하고 있다고 그게 한국 콘텐츠의 글로벌화에 일조를 하는 그런 요인 중에 하나라고 생각합니다.
So such change towards the digital transformation is a global phenomenon, and this has created lots of changes in the culture content industry. And I personally believe the Korean government has quickly responded to this change, which has become one of the big contributors to the success of Korean pop culture.
사실은 소프트 파워와 대중문화의 관계도 좀 설명을 드리려고 했는데 짧게만 설명을 드리겠습니다. 소프트 파워는 정치학에서 다른 나라들이 한 나라에 대해서 가지게 되는 특히 문화적인 영향으로 가지게 되는 어떤 호감을 말하는데요. 그냥 강제적이지 않은 특징을 가지고 있습니다.
I'd like to briefly touch upon the concepts of soft power and mainstream culture. Soft power in politics refers to a cultural influence through an appeal, and it is very important that it is non-coercive.
그래서 이런 말이 있습니다. Culture is not coercion, but fascination.
So they're just saying culture is not coercion, but fascination.
예, 한국의 현재의 문화는 이런 그 소프트 파워를 상징하는 하나로서 지금 받아들여지고 있습니다.
So in Korea, the culture is regarded as one of the soft power factors.
글로벌 측면에서 봤을 때 메인스트림 컬처로 진입하고 있다고는 생각하고 있는데요. 이 메인스트림 컬처라는 거는 학술적으로 모두가 이용하는, 모두가 사용할 수 있는 컬처라는 의미를 갖고 있습니다.
I think Korean culture is on its way to become mainstream. Mainstream culture academically means everyone's culture.
그런데 단점으로는 지나치게 상업화되어 있고 획일화되어 있다는 또 단점이 있는데요.
The downside of mainstream culture is that it can be too commercialized or standardized.
그런데 한국의 팝컬처만 놓고 봤을 때 한국의 팝컬처의 지향점은 모두의 문화이고 그렇지만 다양성과 개성을 존중하는 그런 문화로 한국의 문화가 받아들여지기를 모두가 원하고 있습니다.
So in Korea, we hope the Korean pop culture to become everyone's culture, but at the same time pursues diversity and respects individuality.
한국의 문화가 글로벌하게 받아들여질 수 있는 것은 이런 다양성과 개성의 존중에서 시작한다고 생각하고 있고요. 이런 한국의 문화가 소프트 파워의 하나로 여겨짐에 따라서 한국의 팔러스 메이커들이 콘텐츠 산업의 진흥에 관심을 가지게 됐습니다.
So I believe the popularity of Korean culture is because it pursues respect and it respects individualism. And I think because of Korean culture has become soft power, now policymakers are paying attention to content promotion.
한국의 폴리시 메이커들이 한국 콘텐츠 산업의 정책을 생각할 때 우선 콘텐츠 산업이 한국에서 미래에서 가장 중요한 산업이 될 것이라고 우선 생각하고 있고요. 그리고 특히 디지털 시대에 디지털 콘텐츠로 세계 시장을 리드해 나갈 수 있을 것이라는 기대를 가지고 있습니다.
In Korea, policymakers believe the content industry will become one of the major industries in the future, and we believe we can be as competitive to lead digital content industry in the future.
특히 이런 그 기조는 현 정권이 현재 정부가 들어설 때 제시한 콘텐츠 산업 발전을 위한 어떤 태스크에도 잘 나타나 있습니다.
The current administration is very committed to content promotion. As you can see, content promotion related tasks are reflected in the national government agenda.
네, 간략하게 말씀드리면 한국 정부는 일상생활에서 콘텐츠를 쉽게 누구나 이용할 수 있도록 만들고자 하고 있고요.
So briefly speaking, the Korean government aims to make culture easily accessible and enjoyable in daily lives.
그리고 공정한 산업 생태계를 조성하고 특히 한류를 전 세계적으로 확산하고자 하는 의지가 있습니다.
And the government also focuses on creating a fair industrial ecosystem and want to further globalize Korean pop culture.
그런 의지를 담아서 지난 팬데믹 이전인 1919년에 콘텐츠 산업의 혁신을 위해서 세 가지 메인 전략을 제시한 바 있는데요. 첫 번째가 금융 활성화이고 두 번째가 VR, AR 등의 미래 콘텐츠 산업 육성이고 세 번째가 새로운 한류 정책을 시행하는 것이었습니다.
So before the pandemic, as part of such measure, the government has identified the 3 content industry innovation strategies, which has 3 major key focus areas. As you can see, we have policy financing, 5G-based immersive content, including VR and AR, and new Korean wave.
그러나 2020년에 코로나가 발생하면서 이 3가지 핵심 전략을 약간 수정하게 됐는데요. 비대면, 그러니까 디지털 시대, 코로나 때문에 생긴 온라인 디지털을 이용한 콘텐츠 소비에 대응하기 위한 새로운 전략을 정부는 제시했습니다.
However, in 2020, COVID happened, so the government quickly made modifications to its previous strategies to quickly respond to this non-face-to-face environment to live with COVID and come up with online content-focused strategies.
그리고 작년에 코로나19 이후를 대비하기 위한 정책도 발표를 했고요. 특히 한류의 확산을 위해서 한국 문화원의 기능 강화와 쿠카의 해외 비즈니스 센터 확대, 그리고 온라인 B2B 를 지원을 강화하고 국제교류를 확대하는 등의 전략을 담은 새로운 콘텐츠 산업 혁신 전략이 또 발표가 된 바 있습니다.
And last year, the government has come up with the measures to prepare for the after COVID. So in order to further promote Korean wave, the government has come up with the strategies to strengthen the role of Korean culture centers and expand the business centers of KOCA and strengthen online B2B business and further promote international exchanges.
이제 마지막으로 지금부터는 한류 정책 수립의 환경 변화와 앞으로의 방향에 대해서 좀 간략하게 말씀드리겠습니다.
So from now on, I'd like to talk about the current environment as well as the policy direction towards the future.
마셜 맥루한이라는 분이 예전에 1980년대 글로벌 빌리지라는 개념을 얘기를 한 적이 있는데요. TV로 인해서 글로벌 빌리지가 만들어진다는 의미였는데 지금 현재는 테크놀로지와 소셜 미디어로 인해서 글로벌 빌리지가 만들어지고 있는 상황입니다.
Marshall McLuhan once mentioned about the concept of global village, which would be created through the proliferation of TV. But I think nowadays, global village will be set up and promoted through the technology and social media.
메타버스가 지금 한국에서는 큰 관심을 가지고 있는데요. 블랙핑크나 트와이스 같은 유명 한류 팝 걸 그룹들이 메타버스 가상현실에서 콘서트나 팬 미팅을 여는 등 이렇게 콘텐츠를 중심으로 한 글로벌 빌리지는 이미 활성화되어 있는 것 같습니다.
So Metaverse is a big term in Korea nowadays. As you all know, famous Korean girl groups including Blackpink and Twice held virtual concerts and fan meets throughout this Metaverse. So I think this kind of cultural content global village is already very much activated.
네, 앞으로 한국의 한류 정책 방향은 이 문장으로 설명할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 한국은 콘텐츠로 세계를 아름답게 하고자 하고 있고요.
So I think this sentence here pretty much sums up our policy direction towards the future. We would like to become a country that makes the world beautiful with the power of our content.
특히 모두의 우리 전 지구적인 우리 글로벌 시대에 살고 있는 우리 모두의 지속 가능 발전을 위한 부분에도 노력하고 있습니다. 이 BTS가 UN SDG 모먼트에서 발표한 내용도 이런 내용을 담고 있습니다.
We are also aiming to contribute to the sustainability of the global village as a whole and the community. As you know, BTS urged this concept in their UN SDG speech previously.
네, 이상으로 발표를 마치고 질문을 받도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
That's it for my presentation. Please ask me any questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
Alrighty. So as all our listeners probably can tell, there's a lot packed into this conversation. So I'm sorry if we can't answer all your Q&A. We have seen a few and pulled them out since they might be relevant to several people asking. So one of the first questions, perhaps Yang-Wan, you can elaborate on this more, seeing as you spoke about it in your last slide. One of our listeners is interested to dig deeper, in particular, into the metaverse. So for those of you who don't know, the metaverse is a broad term most commonly used to describe the digital universe made of technologies including virtual reality, augmented reality, and so much more. It is also most commonly characterized by its attributes where they combine aspects in the physical world with the digital world. So that's a whole different talk in itself. But Yawan, if you can elaborate more, perhaps how are the main K-pop entertainment companies planning to adopt the metaverse and perhaps policies that are supporting that?
네, 메타버스에 대해서 조금 더 자세한 예를 들어주시면 감사하겠습니다. 한국의 기획사들이 메타버스를 어떻게 활용하고자 하고 있으며 정책적인 지원은 또 어떻게 마련되고 있는지 얘기해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
네, 짧게 말씀드리면 한국은 현재 메타버스 산업 발전 초기 단계이고 그래서 지금 현재 메이저 기업들은 메타버스 성공을 타진하기 위해서 여러 분야를 시험적으로 운영하고 있다고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 게임이나 콘서트, 그리고 패션, 그리고 교육 사업에 이르기까지 다양한 분야를 지금 현재 테스트하고 있다고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 정부는 아직까지 특별하게 규제를 하려고 생각하고 있지 않고 이런 사항을 주시하면서 그 안에서 나타날 수 있는 윤리적인 문제라든가 저작권 문제 등에 좀 관심을 가지고 지켜보고 있는 중입니다.
So in Korea, Metaverse is in its early stage. As for business, all the major companies are currently testing various areas to become successful in the Metaverse industry. So they are exploring various sectors, including gaming, concerts, fashion, and education. As for the government isn't looking at regulations just yet. Rather, we are closely looking at the market developments to see if there are any other issues related to ethics and copyrights.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to seeing how these developments come along. I think the rest of the world is also keeping close tabs to how things are developing in this digital space. We have one question also for Michael. So you mentioned earlier in your presentation about collaborations that are being done with Korean K-pop idols as well as those abroad, namely in the US. I mean, we've seen BTS with a lot of different collaborators, Blackpink with Dua Lipa, and so much more. One of the questions we have are what obstacles and challenges may come up in pursuing collaboration with US creators and or those in other countries?
한국어로 대답을 드리겠습니다. 제가 그 디테일한 어떤 협업 과정들을 다 보지는 못했기 때문에 세세하게 말씀드리긴 좀 어렵지만 우선 가장 예상되는 저희가 특히 CJ E&M에서 엔데버 컨텐츠라는 큰 제작사를 인수했을 때 예상되는 어떤 그런 가장 큰 챌린지라 하면은 아무래도 아무리 뭐 요즘에 지금 한국 영화라든지 한국 K-팝이라든지 드라마가 굉장히 인기가 많고 사람들이 굉장히 인정을 하고 있다 하더라도 또 미국이라는 그 거대한 시장의 탑 크리에이터들이 얼마만큼 오픈 마인드로 우리와의 협업을 받아들일지 이런 부분들이 되게 좀 조심스럽고요. 그래서 특히 인수를 한 입장이다 보니까는 어떻게 하면 이 사람들의 마음을 빨리 열고 같은 방향을 볼 수 있게끔 잘 매니징을 하고 서로 인스피레이션을 주고받을 수 있는 어떤 시스템을 만들고 이런 부분들에 특히 본사에서는 신경을 써서 좀 많은 준비를 아직도 하고 있는 상황이고요. 그래서 사람을 어떤 사람이 가야 할지 그런 사람들을 한국에서 뽑을 때도 지금 굉장히 조심스럽게 뽑고 있고 그런 부분들이 제일 많이 걱정이 되고 좀 어려움이라고 할 수 있을 것 같아요. 근데 이런 부분은 뭐 미국뿐만 아니라 사실은 저는 지금 태국에 나와 있는데 여기서도 지금 제작 사업을 하고 있는데 여기서도 비슷한 어려움들은 다 있고요. 특히 서로 다른 문화와 어떤 언어를 가지고 있는 사람들이다 보니까는 같이 콜라보레이션해서 뭔가를 하는데 어려움은 있지만 이런 거를 잘 극복하는 게 저희들의 숙제라고 생각을 합니다.
So I can talk about the experience of CJENM's acquisition of Endeavor content. I think if I have to choose one challenge, that would be how open-minded those top creators in the US market would be. Although Korean dramas are immensely popular and well recognized in the US sector, we have to see how open-minded they are. So we are being extra careful in terms of how to setting up the system to exchange information, how to manage the people there, how to make sure we are going towards the same direction, sharing a common goal. So all those measures are currently being placed, and we are also being extra careful with the hiring as well. And I don't think this is only the problem that's happening when collaborating with the US creators. I'm currently in Thailand, and we are collaborating with various market players here as well. And we face different types of challenges because of the cultural differences and language barriers. So those are the tasks that we have to handle and overcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael and Nicole. And so I guess we have room for two more questions. This might be a speed round, but the first question that we have remaining is maybe some takeaways for policymakers in different markets and or those in the entertainment industry. What are some perhaps suggestions you might have if they're looking to replicate some of the success cases that Korea has, had with soft power and the way that it has drawn appeal and attraction through their popular culture content?
한국 성공을 모방하고 이런 소프트 파워를 개발하고자 하는 다른 나라의 정책 입안자나 업계 관련자들에게 제안하고 싶은 내용이 있다면 무엇이 있을까요?
제가 먼저 말씀드리겠습니다. 저희 코카는 그 정부의 문화체육관광부 산하에 있는 그 정부기관입니다. 저희 기관은 그렇지만 그 기업들을 직접 지원하지 않고 간접적인 형태를 통해서 지원을 하고 있는데요. 예를 들면 인력을 양성하고 그 인프라를 제공하고 그 R&D에 집중하고 그 B2B 마켓을 지원하는 형태로 지금 현재 콘텐츠 산업을 지원하고 있습니다.
So the organization that I'm representing is KOCA. It is a governmental agency under the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. So we are not directly supporting enterprises, rather we are indirectly supporting them through nurturing human resources, providing infrastructure, focusing on R&D, and providing B2B market support. Through those efforts, we are promoting content industry in Korea.
특히 우리는 CJENM 같이 큰 회사를 지원하는 기관이 아니고 한 50명 이하, 30명 이하의 작은 기업들을 지원하고 있는데요. 제가 말씀드리고자 하는 것은 이런 기업들의 창의성은 정부가 많이 개입할수록 줄어든다는 것입니다. 그래서 규제는 적게 하고 우선 콘텐츠를 기획하고 창작할 수 있게 한 다음에 거기서 나타나는 부작용을 나중에 고치려는 노력이 가장 정책 입안자로서는 염두에 둬야 할 부분이 아닌가 합니다.
So our main target is not a large corporate such as CJENM. Rather, we focus on small-sized companies with maybe 30 to 50 employees. So what I believe is the more public gets involved in this sector, the less creative they will become. So we'd like to reduce regulations, and rather we'd like to focus on creating and laying the foundation for those creators to create content, and then we'll deal with the problems that happen later. So that is our direction and focus.
I guess one takeaway is that it's a very, very long-term game. It definitely does not come out of nowhere, and it's not an explosion from nowhere either. So our final question, I think we have a fun one. We have a question on Squid Game. Why do either of you or both of you think that it became such a big hit and a phenomenon globally?
오징어 게임이 왜 이렇게 성공했다고 생각하시는지요?
솔직히 말씀드리면 저는 사실은 오징어 게임을 그렇게 뭐라고 해야 될까 이런 말을 하기가 좀 조심스럽긴 한데 그렇게 재밌게 보지는 않아가지고 저는 사실 한국에 어마어마하게 많은 좋은 드라마들이 더 좋은 드라마들 제 개인적으로 많이 있다고 생각을 하고요. 다만 뭐라고 해야 될까요? 이게 그러니까 사실 제가 그 외국인이 아니다 보니까는 왜 외국인 입장에서 이거에 대해서 이렇게 사실 패러사이트는 저는 오케이 그럴만하다라고 생각을 했는데 오징어 게임이 왜 이렇게 외국 분들이 이렇게 열광을 하지? 라는 생각을 좀 했고 고민을 좀 해봤는데 왜 좋아할까? 주변의 외국 친구들한테도 물어보고 우선 새롭다. 자기들이 예전에 봤던 드라마랑은 좀 다르다. 다른 어떤 그런 어떤 미술이라든지 그 게임하는 공간을 만드는 어떤 스케일감, 그것도 독특한 디자인, 약간 이런 것도 되게 흥미로웠고 스토리도 흥미로운데 사실 스토리는 되게 비슷한 스토리들이 꽤 있거든요. 이게 뭐 만화라든지 웹툰이라든지 아니면 뭐 일본 영화라든지 조금씩 비슷한 그래서 약간 익숙하면서도 익숙하지 않은 그러면서 그런 스케일감, 뭔가 소셜 그런 어떤 사람들 계층 차이에 대한 어떤 얘기, 좀 다양한 것들을 짧은 시간 안에 담았고 가장 한국 드라마가 잘하는 거는 그거를 인텐시브하게 지루하지 않게 보여주는 거는 정말 잘하기 때문에 그게 총 몇 편이었나요? 한 10편, 10에피소드 미만이었던 것 같은데 그 짧은 기간 동안 굉장히 정말 지루할 틈 없이만 인텐시브하게 그걸 담아낸 감독 역량 이런 것들이 아닌가 싶습니다. 개인적으로.
So my answer might be a little controversial, but being 100% honest, I didn't quite enjoy Squid Game that much because I personally think there are far better, higher quality dramas in Korea. Also, I'm not too sure why Squid Game has become such a global phenomenon because I'm not a foreigner. I understand why Parasite was popular, but I'm still curious about why Squid Game was such a big success. So I've given some thoughts and I've asked around all those foreigners around me, and many of them said the novelty of Squid Game was one of the big success factors, as well as its unique aesthetics, its sheer scale and design, as well as the story. Although the concept and the stories are somewhat familiar, which were implemented in webtoons and dramas as well as Japanese movies, but the way we presented was familiar but fresh still. Also, it incorporated various factors such as social classes as well. And I think what we are good at as Korean directors is how to present those stories, familiar stories, in a very intensive and captivating manners. So that builds suspense, and the audience found it very interesting.
하나 추가를 하겠습니다. 오징어 게임의 같은 경우는 누구도 시도하지 않은 주제가 있었다고 생각을 합니다. 특히 그 안에서 한국적인 것을 잘 살렸다고 생각을 하는데요. 달고나라는 그런 그 음식, 그리고 한국에서 많이 하는 게임들, 이런 것들이 굉장히 새로웠다고 생각하는 게 있고요. 첫 번째. 두 번째는 넷플릭스의 꼭 영향이 있었다고 봐야 합니다. 그래서 향후에 이런 특정 지역에서 만들어진 콘텐츠가 글로벌화 하는데 OTT가 어떤 역할을 하는지에 대해서도 한번 생각해 볼 필요가 있다고 생각합니다.
So just to add on, I think Squid Game was popular because it dealt with some of the subjects that were never attempted in the market. And also it had a very unique Korean elements such as the Korean traditional snack dalgona and Korean kids games that are played. And another factor is the impact of Netflix. And I think this was very meaningful because this shows how one local content could be globalized through OTT services. So that was what I felt watching Squid Game.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your insights. I know that controversial questions make more interesting conversations. So I'm sure there will be more on that next time. Thank you everyone for joining. It's time to wrap this up. So thank you, Mr. Michael Jung, for joining us, and Mr. Yang-Wan Lee. Thank you for Asia Society for having us and also organizing this incredibly interesting event, and the Korean Cultural Center in Hong Kong for being a partner in this event to make this possible. And of course, Nicole for being our interpreter. This talk will be available on Asia Society Hong Kong's YouTube and Facebook channels. So in case you missed anything, start, middle, or in the end, feel free to rewatch it there. Thank you all for joining us, and see you at the next event.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.